we weren't in a relationship and there's this baby coming, and what do we do, you know?
Thank you for coming and visiting with me today. I'm excited to talk about this with you. Can you first introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us some interests, hobbies, work, anything you want to share about yourself?
My name is Shannon. I am a mom of 4 kiddos and also a birth mother. I live in Roy, Utah. I own a small business called Bloom Placentas where we do professional placenta encapsulation, and I'm also someone who loves to cook and be outside and just connect with nature.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we're going to talk today. You mentioned that you're a birth mother, so we're going to explore that story a little bit. Will you take us back to the beginning, maybe when you first learned that you were pregnant? How old were you, and how did that unfold for you?
Yeah, so I'll maybe go a tiny bit before that. So
Okay.
I was 26 and I got divorced. I was living in Ireland, came back to Utah, and just ended up in a situation with someone else that had also been married before. Short-lived situation, and I found out I was pregnant. And I had ended things with him before I even found out I was pregnant. And so that was just kind of a crisis, but at the same time, not a crisis because it was a baby, if that makes any sense at all. I just remember thinking, we're going to figure this out, right? And so I was already a single mom. I had a little boy that was 3 at the time, and I worked in a restaurant. I didn't have health insurance. There's all these different components to my situation, but I do remember taking the test and finding out I was pregnant, and there was an element of peace there because I knew everything was going to be okay. So it became just kind of a mess with the dad where we weren't in a relationship and there's this baby coming, and what do we do, you know? So that's kind of the start of it, I guess.
How did he react when he found out?
He wasn't really excited. It was, and well, I would say a combo actually. Not excited. I think the idea of the baby and everything stressed him out financially. That was definitely clear that the money part of it stressed him out. But also someone that would have just got married just to maybe make it look right for his family, right? So, but never supportive through everything. Never, I think he just didn't really know what to do. I think we were both in that situation, so I don't want to judge him.
Was he open to getting married? Had you guys discussed that?
Briefly, in more of a, like, this will solve our problem type of thing. If we're married, then everything's okay. And in my mind, having been married before and just feeling like this was kind of a mess, marriage didn't feel like
The answer.
the answer, just to make it look like everything was fine, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then how was your family?
Oh, my family was amazing.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that was hard. I took a while to tell them because having just gone through the divorce and then be in this dumb situation and no one ever even met him, and dumb because it was like, looking back on the whole thing was just, what happened there, you know? But when I finally told them, I especially remember my grandma just being someone who I think at that point in my life had probably thought I would never have done anything that wasn't perfect. And because that's how grandmas are usually, right? They just see our best. And but yeah, everyone was really good about it. I would say though, actually thinking back, my mom had a hard time, but my mom struggled with the idea that when adoption came up, like that was more of the thing. The pregnancy, I think she was excited to have another grandkid, even with the situation, but anyway, I have a good family.
Yeah.
No judgment in my family, which is really awesome.
That is great. And did you have good support from friends?
Yeah, I did actually. I had just a really good group of friends that I had just come back from living in Ireland for a year and reconnected with these friends a few months later. And they were friends that I'd grown up with. That there was a lot of support around me of people that just wanted to make sure I had what I needed, and you know. But one friend in particular, he was a friend that I'd known since high school. Single guy in college. He was awesome. That was really cool to have someone that was just at the appointments with me, and just really helpful with my son too. So was really lucky there. I also had support through LDS Family Services. So if you're pregnant and not married, you can have free counseling through them, and that was really huge. The woman I worked with through there became like a second mom to me.
Wow.
So that was awesome.
That is good. When you said when you first found out, you felt a sense of peace, but then how did you move forward with the day-to-day, like how am I going to deal with this? Not just overall this will be okay, but you still had to work through it. So what did you do next?
Okay, so getting through the day-to-day, I would say there was a little bit of survival mode, I think, being already a single mom, pregnant, and not really having a good relationship with the dad. But also I found support in my church community. A lot of people that, and a lot of the process for me was coming to terms with what I had done. Like, to me, having sex when I'm not married is not something I would think people should do. And I certainly didn't think I should do that, right? And so when I ended up making the choices that I did and ended up in this situation with this baby that I loved so much, I love her so much. You know, it was amazing to feel that bond with someone that you haven't met like we do when we're mothers. But there was definitely an element to me of trying to, I think, forgive myself, which I think any person who feels like they put their own child, in a situation that is less than ideal. And to me, I mean, I'm not married to him. She didn't even come from two people that loved each other. And that seemed really sad to me. And so I'm trying to navigate this mess, but also come to terms with all that. And I think as I moved forward with really the different options I had of keeping her, even there was a point where even my ex-husband said, well, maybe we should just get remarried and we can raise. It was kind of sweet, like just trying to help, and that would have been a mess anyway. But I think the biggest thing to me was my son that I already had and this baby coming, and just wanting to be what I needed to be for them and move forward with what's the best case scenario for all of us, and how am I going to take care of these babies, So, but that was very just Christ-centered to me. Like, I could feel that love and him just surrounding me with this love of like, it's okay. Like, people make mistakes, and it's okay. Everything will work out. And so that was really huge to me, trying to get through that survival mode phase. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And so you moved through the pregnancy, and you mentioned adoption. So how did you come to a point where that was not only an option, but that was the choice that you made? How did you come to that?
So that was the biggest decision I've ever made in my life, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
This is the part where I get choked up, but
okay.
So when I was seeing that counselor through LDS Family Services, they are an adoption agency. So I loved the way that was all handled, though, because it was never pushed on me. It was more, explore this option. Let's think of all your options. Keep the baby, place her for adoption. And I would kind of weigh pros and cons. And the thought of adoption sounded crazy to me. I was 26. During the pregnancy, I'd gone from working in a restaurant to having a pretty good job. I felt like I could provide financially. I already had a son. It just, whenever anyone would mention adoption, I just thought that was crazy. Why would I do that? Why would I give my baby away? But then the closer it got to her coming, the more I just really started to see the situation for what it was. And it was two people that couldn't be in a relationship together were now going to co-parent this baby. And that, I think, the biggest thing to me in feeling like I was protecting her or doing right by her even, and not that he would have hurt her ever, but I think it would have just been a mess to grow up in. It would have been a really hard situation. But the point when I had really tried to make the right decision for her, and there were a few different scenarios happening at the time, I just one day, out of the blue, she was due in, I think, 3 weeks. I just felt this I was actually with my friend that had helped me through the pregnancy. We were driving down the street, and it was like a big shock in the car. Not really, but that's how it felt. And And I just started sobbing, and he said, "This baby isn't supposed to be with you." And I was like, I know. That just totally hit me. It was
came to you really
just
hard.
so cool, and so cool to have it that clear, I think. And it was amazing because that night I spent the night looking on a website through LDS Family Services that doesn't exist anymore, but they had profiles of all these adoptive couples, and I looked at so many, and I felt peace about this. The first couple I looked at was actually the one that we ended up going with, and they're amazing. But that was the first night I slept in the whole pregnancy. That was the first night that I felt like everything was going to be okay. And so, yeah, it was very, I feel like it was last minute because she was due 3 weeks from then, but we know due dates or whatever. But she came 5 days later, and we barely got everything into place. It was really cool to just how everything fell into place. And so, yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, so how did you prepare for that? Because you didn't have a whole lot of time to mentally prepare for that then. So did you do anything to prepare, or what carried you through that to cope with labor and birth and everything that was to come?
So I felt like some of the things I needed to feel mentally prepared were to feel peace about the couple. I couldn't interview them or anything, or even meet them before I told them. That just wasn't how it worked. So getting to know them through emails and feeling like it just felt very peaceful. And like I knew her before, and knew the mom that adopted her. And so that really helped me a lot, just to feel like I'd asked all my questions. I had a few things that were like, if I had my ideal life right then, what would it be like? And that's where she's going to go. That's where the baby's going to go, right? So that helped me a lot to kind of get to chat with them and get to know them that way. So I would say, thinking of preparing for the labor and the birth, I'd already had a baby before, but this was different because this wasn't going to be my baby. Having a doula was huge. Having someone there that, my doula is my aunt that had come. She actually had been involved in some adoption situations, and just really is someone that's very comforting to me. And so that helped a lot, having her there through the whole process. But once the decision was made, it actually did feel very peaceful. I know some people are really scared at that point in an adoption process. Mine felt very guided, very like I was being lifted up and protected, and everything was okay. So
that's nice. That's a nice blessing. So can you tell us a little bit about the birth and then how that unfolded?
Yeah, so since I told the couple that I was going to place the baby with them, we decided to go to dinner one night, and this was 2 weeks before the baby was due. So that was amazing to go to dinner with them and sit and hang out and chat with them and get to know them on that level. That night I went home and went to bed and woke up in a puddle. My water broke in the night, and this was a second time mom, but I didn't really know how to react to that. And I called labor and delivery at the hospital, and they said to come in. And so I went in and wasn't in labor, just had broken waters. So I got there around midnight and had planned to have an epidural and everything just to be the standard medicated birth that would make it so easy for me. And they found that my blood was very thin and I couldn't have an epidural. So thank goodness for my doula, because I feel like I winged an unmedicated birth and it was amazing. I remember thinking how bad it must hurt when the baby's coming out. I just thought that was going to be insane, and I remember feeling her come out, and it was amazing. And I think about that, the way my body connected to her in that birth, because I felt what I felt. That made the whole experience just more real, so I wasn't disconnected from what was happening. So I feel really grateful for that. But it went from my water breaking to a baby in my arms in 5 hours. And that was really, to me, a blessing of not having a long, drawn-out, exhausting labor. So that I told the couple I would call them to come to the hospital because they could meet her while we were in the hospital still. So I called them in the morning, and when they came, I just remember one of my favorite parts of the experience was how that feeling when you're with your new baby, whether you have the baby at home or in the hospital, you're in the birth center, you're snuggling your new baby and you're there and you're just so happy to have your baby. And that feeling wasn't in the room with just me and her. I love her, I'm kissing on her, it was great, but it wasn't the same as when I'd had my son. And when they came and they were snuggling her on the couch, and I remember looking over at them, and that's when the feeling was there, just that this was their family, So it was a really blessed birth between me having the support I needed from the doula and the way I just mentally was able to cope with the change of birth plan and having them there. It was pretty cool.
So you took her to the adoption agency.
So I had the one night in the hospital,
Okay.
and then we had placement straight from the hospital. We went to the adoption agency. So that was a hard point, because they tell you once you hand the baby over, you just basically leave the room. So, and even before that, when you're relinquishing your rights, once you lift the pen, your rights are relinquished. So those types of things were just, even though I knew I was doing the right thing, it was, I don't know, just having it be final, So, but I remember we sat in the room, me and the couple and my friend that had come with me. I just held the baby. It was probably a good hour that we just all chatted, and someone had told me you would know when the time was right to hand the baby over, and I thought, how would you know that? That just seems so strange. But I actually remember feeling almost like guided to hand her over to the mom, and I remember handing her, and they were just so excited, and we just left the room, and I looked back on them as I was leaving, and just seeing that couple watch their baby was really cool. And at that point, I was ready to get back to normal, I guess. And you kind of feel that way to an extent, I guess, when you're not pregnant anymore, right? Of like, now I can bend over and tie my own shoes, or just feel like you can move and breathe better. My son had been with his dad for 2 weeks, so I hadn't seen him in 2 weeks. So I was ready to hurry and get home to him, and all of that, and just be that mom again. But I was really concerned about postpartum depression. So I really struggled with my first, and so much, like every woman who has a baby doesn't want to struggle with postpartum depression. In this scenario, for me, I don't think I cared about anything more right then than not having postpartum depression and not being able to take care of my son, but also feeling like it could be compounded with the adoption situation. So I knew for me, I needed to make sure I was having some good nutrition and getting my body moving. And this was winter time, so a few weeks postpartum, probably 2 weeks, I was at the gym just slowly walking on the treadmill and just feeling like at least I could do something. It was a freezing cold January that year, and I happened to see a commercial for a group training for a marathon. It was one of those fundraiser marathon training things, and I thought, I should run a marathon. So I ran a full marathon. It was 5 months to the day after I had her. And the first day I went to train with the group, I couldn't run for 30 seconds. So that was huge for me.
Yeah.
Personally, having to go from, not only for me, an unmedicated birth was very empowering. The adoption was huge. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I did it, and it all came together fine. So I had this just drive to do something else big, and so to me the marathon just made sense, and I never struggled postpartum, and that was really cool. Anytime I would get, and still to this day, if I ever have a moment where I'm like, feel sad about the situation, it doesn't happen very often, but if I do, I always hear this calm voice saying, you did the right thing. Exactly like that, you did the right thing. And it's like, okay, I'm at peace about all that. So I felt like, as far as like recovering from having the baby and the emotion of the adoption, it went pretty smooth for me with the job that I had, the support I had even with my coworkers, and then having my son and the marathon training. So I just felt like I was, doing everything I needed to do with finding times to, I don't know if I ever mourned, but just came to terms with things. It just all felt like I was really watched over through all that, if that makes sense.
I'm wondering, as an outsider looking in at what you were going through, what would be the best way for someone to support somebody like you who when they were going through it? Like, how did your friend that supported you so much, what stood out? What helped you from others?
I think a lot of asking what I need and me not feeling like a burden, just different things. I was really sick through the pregnancy, so having that help with my son or with cleaning the house, things like that. A combo of asking and making sure and consistently asking, right, what do you need today? That type of thing. Being willing to talk about things very openly, because I didn't want to pretend that this wasn't happening. Obviously, when you have a big round belly, you can't pretend that's not happening, but being willing to talk about it and letting me be real about it, and that's okay. I felt a lot of prayers. A lot of people were praying for me, that friend in particular, but just that felt like it was just helping me feel calm about the situation. Yeah, and no judgment. That was huge to me, and I've tried to continue to convey that to other people, that you make a choice. I made a choice. I got myself in the situation, but not one time did anyone ever say, this is your own fault, or, it was just, I can look back on it as a really amazing thing that led to a really awesome adoption instead of this mistake I made or whatever.
Right. Feeling the shame of that. So, what are some of the blessings or things that you've gained and learned through this experience?
That motherhood is bigger than us. Now I get choked up again, but to think what we would do for our kids, and that's the only way I did it was for her, and so yeah, just knowing that we can do anything for our kids, especially when we're using our Savior and that support around us, that we can do what's right even when it feels really hard. And it definitely left me with this, it stayed with me 14 and a half years later. I can do anything. The hardest thing that, for me, that was the hardest thing I could imagine. I know there's harder things, but that was what my hard thing was at the time, and just to know I can do that if I want to, right? And and just how amazing a situation, you can turn your hard trial into a huge thing for a family or for anyone else, right? The family that adopted her are so happy to have her, and not that I would have been happy to have her, but it just took her out of this mess and put her in their amazing family.
Well, you have a lot of strength. I can see that is something too that I don't know if you learned it through that or if you had it in you the whole time.
I don't know. It definitely strengthened me, for sure. Another blessing I think of through all this is just where I'm at now. So 14 years later, I'm happily married. I have 3 more kids, and I just feel like my life is what I want it to be. And I feel like so much of that is because of the adoption, and that I didn't have to keep this messy situation for my little girl. And not saying that it's right for everyone, because I don't want to act like I know it all, but that's been really huge. And I also have this really healthy relationship with her and her family, and I don't see her a lot. I've only seen her a handful of times, but we can chat a little bit through Facebook, or I get to see a lot of pictures and videos of her thanks to social media. But it was really cool. I hadn't seen her in 6 years, and a few weeks ago I was driving down the street, and I have this cute girl and her mom waving to me in the car, and it was them. They saw me, and so I love that. And we pulled over and chatted, but what I loved about that was just that it's healthy and open, and it was okay that they waved me down. They recognized my van and waved me down to pull over and chat, instead of, there's no avoiding each other, there's no awkwardness or anything about it. And so that to me is just another really huge blessing, that I can be someone that's positive in her life and someone that she'd want to see and be excited to see, and that I can have my family now and my marriage and everything I have now, just to feel like I'm at peace there, and she's happy and thriving and doing amazing with her family too. So
That's great. And I feel like she probably has so much love and respect for what you gave her.
yeah, I think so. I think it's the way her parents talk about me too. I can just tell that it's not this, let's not talk about your birth mom. It's like she's made a family, and so that's something for me to be really proud of, I feel like, and to acknowledge as a miracle where we all ended up instead of this terrible situation. But,
Yeah, made something good out of it. Awesome. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I just think adoption isn't for everyone. I know that, but I think that I hope through sharing my story and my situation that more people will at least open their minds to these options of knowing that, and the choice to parent a child in a situation that's not ideal, or an abortion or adoption, all those things. I think when people really can explore that of what are my options and what might be okay. Before I went through this, I wouldn't have thought an adoption would be so okay, so empowering, so not even just okay, beyond okay, and so I think that I just have always hoped that through hearing my story or stories like mine, that women, young girls that are in these situations with an unplanned pregnancy can really see that the adoption world is really cool for most people. So that's all I would add, just to open our minds to our options.
Yeah. Thank you.